Hi! Just wanted to pop in and first of all say hello because I haven't been recording videos for quite a while now, thanks to this little duty here, Sky, she's sleeping. But I thought this topic today is quite big, and although I might do a written post in the future, I thought it would be quite nice to speak to you over a video and just share some simple tips and ideas on how to work with it. So it's a topic that's been coming up a lot, both in client sessions but also in my emotional toolbox workshop that I run recently, and that is on how to deal with our ego. So the main thing for me is to, first of all, appreciate that we all have an ego. You can call it, our critic, our mental chatter. You can call it, our negative self-talk. You can talk about it in terms of your inner fear or however it resonates for you. But it's a very normal and human, experience to have that inner talk that tells you that you can't do certain things, or you're not ready, or to find yourself comparing to other people. And these are just some of the things that have been coming up. And the number one thing is to first of all think about how you deal with it. So the majority of us essentially don't even think about it as a separate type of thinking. So we don't consider our ego separate to us. So therefore, when we are processing certain things, we think that, okay, if I'm having this thought, for example, I'm not ready to do this, then we believe that this is the truth, and we don't consider that to be just a random thought that our ego brings up. So the number one thing is to start to recognize, okay, where is my ego talking and where is my true self? So the ego is not the real you. The ego is not how you necessarily feel about things. The ego is something that is there it's triggered in order for you to feel protected. So the ego, or fear, if you want to think about it that way, is essentially a part of you that is telling you, oh look, this is too risky, you're going to get hurt, so I better shout at you and make sure that you're listening so that you understand that you need to take a step back. Now the majority of the time the ego is shouting for no reason. So for example, many people resonate with this, feeling quite anxious about speaking in public or meeting new people. The ego will say, oh, you can't, you're not very good at crowds, or you're really boring, you're not going to be interesting enough, you have nothing to say, or who's going to listen to me. And this is really, a very, very common experience, and it basically just shows you how the ego is saying, this is too scary for you, and it's very likely that you will get hurt, or that you won't succeed, and therefore you will again hurt yourself. So it's a way that it's trying to keep you within your safe bubble, within your comfort zone. Now we know that in order to achieve the things that we want to in life, the majority of the time we have to get out of our comfort zone. And obviously this is something that I work with a lot with my coaching clients. And it's very, very scary because the ego will do whatever it can to let you know how terrifyingly, new that situation is and that you can't cope with it. So as I said before, number one is to start recognizing, okay, when is my ego talking, and when is it actually my intuition, or when is it my my true self that I can resonate with. So some tips on thinking and working with the ego is to first of all begin with understanding that your ego is not your enemy. So I don't believe in smashing fear, or fighting it or battling with it and just sort of trying to stop it altogether. I believe that the ego is a little part of us, and I think of it most of the time, I think of it as a tiny version of me that is so absolutely terrified that it actually needs protection. So it's a little, it's a mini me, and she's sitting in my, around my heart space. I really resonate with that image. And she is shaking out of fear. And, now having a puppy, actually, I can see how, I can actually visualize the ego as, even as a small puppy that is terrified of all these big dogs and scary new situations, and it tries to hide. And sometimes when puppies are afraid, they start barking, right? Or they start, just showing sort of aggressive behavior because they're trying to protect themselves. So this is exactly what the ego does. The ego will shout. It will be very, very harsh and abusive sometimes. So our negative thoughts can be so incredibly toxic. We would never dream of speaking to anyone as we speak to ourselves. Yet we're so used to that background, that background chatter, that we don't even recognize that it's just there. And then because we have that in the background, we tend to operate based on these thoughts. So we believe the ego talk, and we often don't question it. We don't question whether it's valid. So once you think of, if you start thinking of the ego as a little version of you that's really scared, you wouldn't ever try to, tell a puppy off because it's scared. You might do to discipline it later on, but not when it's scared. So you're trying to teach, the ego that it's okay, I've got you, this is safe, I can comfort you. I understand what you're afraid of, but look, trust me, let me hold your hand and I'm going to guide you through it. You need to start separating the ego talk from the real talk. So I sometimes think of it as, okay, rather than saying, I believe that I'm not ready for this, or I think that I'm not good enough, you can start to separate and start to say, my ego thinks I'm not ready for this. My ego thinks it's going to be too scary. My ego thinks nobody's going to like me. And that way it starts to create a little bit of a gap between, what is real, what is you, what's in your heart, and what is that fearful talk. You have to be extremely kind and really compassionate. So as I said before, speak to the ego. So I always speak to my ego because she's very loud a lot of the time. So I always say, I understand you're trying to get hurt. I understand you're trying not to get hurt. I understand you're trying to keep me safe, but I've got you. We're safe. Let's do this together. The next bit is understanding that the ego is not going to go away. So fear is a natural human response, human reaction. It's not going to go away, and we do not want it to go away because it actually protects us from real threatening situations. So by trying to switch off the fear, you're actually you're actually attempting to switch off something that is very good for you to have. So a normal amount of fear is useful in most situations. However, what you need to get used to is the fact that when it's, when you're trying to do something that is outside of your comfort zone, so when you're entering a new situation that's quite challenging, you need to get used to the fact that the ego will be louder. But that doesn't have to stop you. So when you understand that, okay, it's gonna happen. So I know I'm taking I'm taking a big leap. I know that my ego is gonna start being loud. How does she speak to me? What does she say? What does she tend to, how does she tend to make me react? What do I do as a response to it? So once you know your patterns, once you know the ego's patterns, then you actually can prepare for it. So you don't fall into the trap of listening to the negative self-talk. Very, very gradually, you start to dial down the intensity of the ego. So once you know her patterns, then you know not to keep following the thoughts, and therefore the intensity of the thoughts will start to lower. Again, it doesn't mean that she will ever stop. She will be there by your side. She will keep shouting, but maybe gradually you're going to start to be able to redirect your attention to that real you, the real part of you that knows that what you're doing, yes, it's scary, yes, it's risky, but it's worth it, and it's worth going through that fearful stage. So one way that you could switch your awareness away from the fear talk into the into that sense of feeling grounded and secure in what you're doing, is to say to yourself, the moment where you get your fearful thought is to say, I hear you, but I choose to reach for a higher thought. So your higher thought could be your affirmation. It could be something like, I am safe, or, I feel confident in following through with this, or it could be any phrase that makes you feel like you've got this, essentially. One of the things that I finally like to use is a physical reminder. So because I'm very much, an analytical person, so a lot of the time I'm in the head. It's not a very good thing often, but it's useful. But it means that because I'm in the head a lot of the time, I do tend to, often disconnect from the body, and therefore it's easier for me to get stuck in these thoughts. So I try to use techniques that take me away from the head and down into the body. And some of these techniques include having a physical reminder. So something like a crystal, or even sort of, a ring or a pebble or anything that basically reminds you that you are a body and not just thoughts. And you can actually just set an intention connected to the, to your object. And, it basically is a reminder, I'm not going into the details of sort of the energetic aspect of crystals. This is just literally a reminder of your intention to move forward with your goal, so that you know that when you reach for this, for this object, you are reminded of the intention of moving forward, and the awareness that, okay, my ego is going to be loud, but I know why I'm doing this. So I'm going to stop you here. I'm going to ask you to just let me know, if you have any thoughts about how you deal with the ego. What does she tend to say to you? How, what patterns, what's her patterns of showing up? And how does it stop you? So what, start to pay attention. How does your ego stop you? Which is very, very normal if it does. What do you tend to do? So just starting to think about these things, feel free to email me or leave me a comment below, and just really start to pay attention and think of your ego as a little version of you that's really, really scared, and your job is to comfort her and to just keep going. Great, nice to see you, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.